Hey, it's your favorite live streaming influencers, vGïx. I'm Geith.
And I'm Jim, and today we are doing the ultimate AliExpress live streaming controller shootout. So what we did is we went to everybody's favorite website, AliExpress, and picked up 5 of the most popular controllers that we have right here. The portable 61 keys foldable piano USB MIDI keyboard, electronic piano, hand roll piano keyboard instrument, the TYST video mini switcher control panel, the WINWET1650HD video channel switcher control panel, the TYST 1500HD, and the TYST 4ME advanced switch panel keyboard. So what we're going to do is we're going to test this out, we're going to let you know what we do like and what we don't like, and you can jump through to the chapters to check out all the different controllers. So take it away, Geith.
Here I have the TYST mini panel. It's the low-cost option if you're looking for switching on a budget. Now, it might have a name that I've blanked out that suggests that this device is in some way affiliated with a certain streaming software, but I can assure you it is not. You would think that this would be easy to just plug in and use, but you need a template or a config file, and unfortunately, to get one, you need a Chinese phone number, which we didn't have. So, instead of letting that stop us, we went ahead and created the template files ourselves, and if you would like a copy of those, you can get them from our website at vgïx.com, and I'll link that in the description. So first up, we've got a range of preview buttons for 8 inputs. Same goes for our program buttons, so we can switch between. We can go to input 4 in preview, and then we can use something like cut to cut from preview to program, and you see those switch, and we'll cut back. Then we've got a take button that can be customized for anything in a program like vMIX. We've got a T-bar that can switch from one to the other. We've got volume control knobs, 4 of. I've programmed these to be preview, program, headphones, and master. Then a series of buttons for controlling our recording, our stream, our LED, and fade to black. Now I've programmed LED to be our external output. And then finally we've got 4 function buttons. Now these are completely customizable, and what I've done is I've linked them to our 4 overlays in a program like vMIX where overlays are very powerful. So by programming these to fire an overlay based on what's in preview, I can do something like press input 3, which is a title, and I can put that onto my overlay 2. And I'll turn that off. So that's pretty cool. Overall, the pros of this device are that it's decent value and it's very compact. It has a reasonably solid, albeit plastic build quality, and it's got some common MIDI notes for buttons on other TYST controllers, but I'll explain that a bit more later. As for the cons though, you have a pretty limited range of buttons for custom functions, because like me, you're probably going to end up using those 4 function buttons for your overlays. It also comes with a fairly short USB-A to USB-A cable, and these are pretty rare and hard to come by, so if you're looking for something longer, you're unlikely to have one in your own personal stock. And finally, you're probably going to have to make your own template files or download the ones from our website, because getting your hands on the originals is pretty tricky unless you live in China. So overall, this thing does the job. It's pretty good for 8 inputs. It's got a nice solid clunk when you press on those buttons. Overall, the functionality's there. What I don't like is that all of your special function buttons are going to end up being used up by your overlays, so that's not great. You've also got this USB-A to USB-A cable, which frustrates me a little bit. And finally, getting your hands on the template's basically impossible, so be prepared to make your own. Overall, I would give this 1 corn cob and 5 chilies.
When you hear the name WINWET, you instantly think of a brand that's synonymous with live video switchers. And here I have the WINWET1650HD video switcher. As you can see, it has a pretty cool configuration, plenty of keys, slider, T-bar, and a joystick, and it passes the knock test, so it's fairly well made. You've got metal casing here and a plastic siding over here. Now the keys themselves aren't particularly great. Now you don't get great vertical travel on the keys, and you do get an inconsistent finger feel. So for example, when I press 1 here, it's much softer than when I press 9. So 9 is much more responsive and a lot harder push, which is what you want. So that's to be expected for this type of price point when it comes to switching. Usually the keys aren't that great. You can get different coloring and that sort of thing as well. But overall it's okay, but for those that are looking for really expensive keys, this is probably not for you. Now overall you have your preview row here, so you can press something to put it into the preview, 1 to 12 here. Same goes to the program. You can instantly switch to something in your first 12 inputs. On the end here you have an auto or a take transition like so, and then you have a cut one here as well. So those are your options. You can use 1 to 12. Above that you have a subtitle area, which are inputs that can be put into what vMIX calls overlay channels. So you have this row up here called DSK, which is overlays. So I can select, let's say, overlay channel 1 here, and then I can select an input to put it into. Now the good thing about this row is that you can select between 1 to 12 and 13 to 24, and those are marked on each key. So this one says 2 and 14. So if I select 1 to 12 and then press number 3 here, it's going to put my title into overlay channel 1, and I can press it to turn it off. If I wanted to use, let's say 18, I would press this and then press 18 here, like so. Now my biggest gripe with the WINWET is the fact that you can't do this with your preview and program. You're stuck to 1 to 12 on both of these, which is a bit of a pain, where the TYST actually allows you to shift to 24 on both of these as well. So that's a plus for the TYST. Overall, you do have some other good buttons here. You have full screen, external, you have my recording, multi-quarter streaming, video control, transitions. You do have a cool little audio mixer here with LEDs, so when I move this down, I've set this to my master audio, so you'll see my master audio level go down in the switcher. And the LED corresponds to that as well. So that is pretty handy to have. Next to that, you have your joystick. So this joystick is pretty much identical to all the TYST ones as well, so vGïx is going to go over that in a later review. Underneath that, it does have some cool modes though, so you can set your joystick to be used when it's with a camera in preview or a camera in program if you wanted to, and you can also use the virtual PTZ control as well. So if I select virtual and then preview, I can now use the virtual control in this one here, so what's in my preview, which is pretty cool, and I can reset it up there. So that is a little bit different mode that this one has that the TYST doesn't. As I mentioned before, T-bar works great and there's great stem clearance. Let's talk about pros for the WINWET. It does have 69 keys, it has a slider, has a T-bar and a joystick, has pretty decent construction as we showed before, and it is nicely laid out if you've got the configuration file. Now the keys themselves aren't the greatest quality. The configuration file is hard to come by, so you will need to find that, and do you really trust it? And I do wish that there were more than 12 keys here for the preview and program. That is pretty annoying that you can't have 24, whereas you can with your overlays. And how reliable is a WINWET going to be for your mission critical productions? Overall, this is a pretty well laid out device. It gives you a lot of different options, and obviously you can customize these buttons however you like as well. I definitely recommend checking out the other devices in the same price point. Maybe this has better functionality, maybe those ones do. You can check those out and compare. So I give the WINWET TY-1650HD 3 corns on the cob, 3 chilies, and 1 tangerine.
Okay, back to the TYST range, and here you can see that we've got the 1500HD model, which sits in the middle between the Mini and the 4ME. This looks a lot like the WINWET that Jim reviewed, in that it has 12 inputs for your preview, program, and overlay. But there are some key differences that I'm going to talk about that might make you go one way or the other if this is the sort of switcher size that you're looking for. Now, before I go further, once again, getting your hands on a template or config file in order to use this in a program like vMIX is very hard. We did manage to get one, and we've tweaked it up to make it work for us. So you'll find that on our website as well. So just go to the link in the description if that's what you need. So let's have a look at it. Firstly, we've got the preview and program buttons, and the interesting thing about these is you've got shift keys for both. So unlike the mode key on the WINWET, you can press shift and switch to a second range from 13 through to 24 for your preview and for your program. So if I wanted to go to input 16, for example, I would press shift and then go 13, 14, 15, 16 and press that, and there we go. We've now turned on input 16. Now obviously the problem here is I don't know, unless I count them through, what they're called. So it would have been nice to have seen a secondary number up in the top corner. just like they've got on the WINWET for the overlay channels. Okay, next, 8 transition effects, which is a few more than the WINWET. And we've also got an interesting feature here of being able to send inputs to the program overlay, but also to the preview overlay. So I'll show you what I mean by that. So if I wanted to put my input 3 onto overlay 1 in my preview, I would press overlay 1 on preview and press input 3. And there I've put my title on the preview, which is quite cool. And now to look at some of the things that I don't think are as good on this device as they are in the WINWET. So firstly, we've got our volume controls here, and neither of them have LED fader strips, so we can't see exactly where they're set if they're changed in vMIX, but not changed with the fader itself. So I think that's a bit of a pain. The next thing is the location of the T-bar with the function buttons. So if I'm trying to reach for these function buttons, there's a risk that I'll bump this fader. So I would have liked to have seen the fader off to the right, just like it is on the WINWET. And then we have the joystick controls, which we can use to control PTZ cameras. So if I go back to the preview of input 4, which is my PTZ camera with VISCA over IP control, I can zoom in using the dial, and I can move to the right, and I can then use my T-bar to fade that shot in. Very nice. All right, let's get to the pros and cons. So for the first pro, you've got 24 inputs that you can control, albeit with 12 buttons, but 24 inputs is still pretty good. You've also got a nice solid construction, and you've got all of the features that you would expect in a switcher of this size: faders, joystick, T-bar, function buttons, transition effects, and overlays. And now for the cons. The template file, as usual from TYST, very hard to come by, so that's a shame. The button numbering isn't perfect. Having those secondary numbers would have been really helpful so you know what you're pressing once you press shift. And finally, how well will this thing work in a critical production? So overall, this is a good choice if you need 24 input switching and you're on still a fairly tight budget. If you don't need things like a T-bar and a joystick and faders, then there are some simple button solutions that are a lot cheaper than this that I would recommend. But if you're in need of those features, then this could be a good option for you. Overall, I'll offer this an even split of 3 corn cobs and 3 chilies.
When I was younger and I saw the film Big with Robert Loggia and Tom Hanks, I too used to dream about being able to play a giant keyboard. Now that I'm years older, I kind of have that opportunity. I now have a giant keyboard that I can use to control my vMIX productions. I can use my fingers to dance along the keys and create beautiful music via my live streaming and my live video. So what's cooler than rocking up to a live production with a giant keyboard with 61 keys and then creating an awesome show? Absolutely nothing. It has the wow factor that you've been looking for to show off to all of your friends, family, and colleagues when doing your productions. Now, because this is a MIDI device, all you need to do is plug it in, and vMIX allows you to obviously create shortcuts for any of these keys. So for example, I've got this one here set up to do a title. And then I've got this one up here. It's going to do a transition between the preview and the program. So you can set this up to do pretty much whatever you like. Now, what are some of the pros of it? Well, obviously it looks totally awesome and you'd be crazy not to think that. It has 61 keys, so that's a ton of different shortcuts that you can program. It's easy to program by using the shortcuts in vMIX, and lastly, it is, again, insanely cool if I haven't already mentioned that. Now, some of the cons of this device, there's no labeling, so you'd have to make your own labels either with a label maker or with some tape. There are no activators to give you feedback from vMIX itself. And of course, it is a tad flimsy as well. So rubber keys, it's a little bit flimsy, although you can roll it up. It's a little bit cumbersome, but you can just roll it up and chuck it in your bag if you want to. Now, if you are looking for a switcher with that wow factor, if you want to impress everybody at your production site, then this is probably a go-to for you. It is pretty flimsy, and who knows how long these keys are going to last for, so that's something to consider. But at the price point, maybe buy 10 of them, and then you could kind of have 1 or 3 as backups in case you need it. But let's face it, if you are buying a portable 61 keys foldable piano, USB MIDI keyboard, electronic piano, hand-rolled piano keyboard instrument off AliExpress, you're doing it for the looks and you're not necessarily doing it for the quality. So I give this device 4 corners on the cob and 2 chilies as my rating.
Well, we've made it to the piece de resistance of TYST switches, the TYST 4ME advanced panel. This thing comes complete with 24 keys that you can access straight away for preview, program, and overlay, and also for 4 different mixes, which I'll explain in a minute. You've also got 8 camera control, 8 function buttons, and all of the other features that you'd expect from a standard switcher. All right, so let's take a look at it in a little bit more detail. So firstly, just the regular features of being able to change your preview and fade that to program and so forth. But also the mix controls. So with your 4 mixes, you can have 4 completely independent productions running out of a program like vGïx, provided you're using 4K or above. So if I go to mix 2, for example, here I've got in preview input 3 and in program input 4, which is pretty cool. And I can do the same for mix 3 and switch them up. And I can use all of my transition keys through here on any of those mixes, which again, very neat. We've got those function keys that you can program to do whatever you want. And you've got camera controls, just like any other camera control on any of the other switches that have the joystick. I can switch between these, and in this case, I can set it to 4. And that's our input. I'll bring that into the preview. I'll fade it over so that you can see it, and I'll move the camera a little bit. There we go. Oh, too far, and back we go. All right, and fade back. In addition to that, we've got our volume controls, our regular controls, overlay controls, and the ability to select 4 separate auto buttons, which can be used for custom transitions that you program them to be. So I might set my auto 1 is currently set as fade, my auto 2 is set as slide, my auto 3 is zoom, and my auto 4 is merge, which will just look like a fade at the moment. So as far as pros go, you're not going to find a switching panel with more buttons for this price point. And it comes in a very solid, sturdy enclosure that can be recessed into your table if you want. And despite its size, it only needs 1 USB cable for power and for communication. And as I was saying earlier on the MIDI controller, it has common keynotes for your MIDI controls. And so if I was to press preview input 1 on this device, but then go ahead and plug in a Mini instead of this device and press the same button on the Mini, it'll be recognized as the same button. So that's handy if you're switching between controllers. And as for the cons, unlike the build quality of the frame, the buttons I would say are not quite as good. While they are big and have a lot of travel, some of them are pretty spongy and can get caught low, and you got to flick them out. And some of them, if you press a bit high on the button, for example here, they don't always work. Pressing the middle is normally solid, but the tops, sometimes not so much. So that's not ideal. The other thing is, given the robustness is a little bit in question, are you willing to spend that much money on a switcher for any sort of critical work? I personally wouldn't, but you might have a different opinion. So overall, this thing is a beast. The ability to control 4 completely independent mixes out of a program like vGïx from one control surface and have the ability to control up to 24 separate inputs at ease, that's pretty amazing. The build quality, I would say, is a bit questionable, and so I wouldn't be using this for critical workflows. But if it's a non-critical production where if pressing a wrong button once in a blue moon isn't going to be the end of the world, then I think this is a great option. So I'm not going to give it any chilies, but I'll give it 8 solid corn cobs.
Wow, what a great shootout. What a great comparison of all of these different devices from AliExpress. What was your favorite, Geith?
I'd have to go with the TYST 4ME Advanced panel. Having those 24 keys means you've got access to all of your inputs at once, and those 4 mix effects means you can have 4 completely independent productions running at the same time. I think that's pretty cool. What about you?
Well, my favorite is probably the TYST 1500HD. Although the WINWET is a 1650HD, 150 more than the 1500, I think I prefer the fact that you can use all 24 of your inputs for preview, program, and for your overlay. So I think that's probably my favorite. Although the WINWET is pretty good, it's not quite as good as the 1500, in my opinion anyway.
You can't forget the keyboard though.
That is true. I did really enjoy the keyboard. I think just straight looks, you rock up with one of these, somebody's going to be like, yeah, nice try. But if you show up with a keyboard, you're going to get a lot more respect from people that are around the production. Now, a lot of the downfalls with these are the keys themselves. Not great finger feel, not great travel. You know, you actually have problems with some of these buttons not lighting up and getting caught and that sort of thing. So the buttons themselves and keys, sliders, they're not particularly great quality. So that's something to really take a look at.
The other thing that we noticed was almost none of these come with template files that you can gain access to easily. And so you're going to end up either making your own shortcuts and activator templates, or you're going to have to dig them up from somewhere. So good luck with that.
Keep in mind that none of these controllers are actually supported by the live streaming software that we were using today, so you're probably better off using one of their recommended ones, as they probably can't help you out, although a lot of people do use them, so it may totally work for you. However, in mission critical situations, do you really want to be using a random controller off AliExpress?
Yeah, so that's it, I think. We might wrap it up. So thanks very much for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Bye.